January 27th, 1943. The morning air over northern Germany was already torn, with white streaks contrails twisting against the pale winter sun. Inside the tight cockpit of a Messerschmitt Bf 109, Oberleutnant Hans Philipp leaned forward against his gun sight. The breath inside his oxygen mask fogged the glass. Ahead of him, black specks glinting silver in formation. 58 Boeing Flying Fortresses, the first American daylight raid against Germany itself. Philipp had been fighting since Spain. He'd outflown Hurricanes over Britain, Yaks over the Don, Warhawks in the desert. He knew how bombers died 400 yards, short burst, 20mm shells ripping through aluminum, flames, then gravity did the rest. But this formation was different. He pressed the trigger. His cannons thundered, brass casings spinning away, shells striking, pieces of skin and wing torn free, yet the bomber kept flying. He dove through a storm of tracer fire, pulled 6 Gs, vision tunneling, breath ragged. When he leveled out, the formation was still there, unbroken, unstoppable. That morning, the Luftwaffe realized they were facing something new, an aircraft that could take the punishment of 10 raids and still make it home. What was the secret inside those fortresses? And how did a single bullet half an inch wide help decide the air war over Europe? Beat. Stay with me. When the first intact flying fortress fell into German hands in early 1943, Luftwaffe ordnance officers gathered around it like archaeologists at a dig. Panels were pried off, ammunition boxes hauled out. The scene felt less like a victory and more like a mystery being solved. Inside those dull metal cans lay rounds they'd never seen before, brass casings nearly 6 inches long. Bullets half an inch wide, each one heavy enough to bruise a palm. They measured, weighed, tested, and realized why their fighters were being shredded long before reaching attack range. This was the .50 caliber Browning cartridge, born at the end of the First World War, perfected through 2 decades of American engineering. A round built not for elegance, but endurance. Muzzle velocity, 2,900 feet per second. Energy, 12,000 foot-pounds. That was 4 times what the standard German 7.92mm round delivered. But it wasn't just power, it was orchestration. Every 5th round was a tracer magnesium bright, burning like a comet. Between them came armor-piercing steel core shells, armor-piercing incendiaries that ignited on impact, and standard ball rounds to fill the gaps. Each belt was a composition, like a symphony of destruction, designed to give gunners both feedback and firepower. Every squeeze of the trigger sent out a rainbow of death that could tear through armor, rupture fuel, and still show exactly where the next burst should go. For the Germans, the math was horrifying. Their doctrine assumed bomber defenses were dangerous only within 400 yards. That was the safe zone outside it. They were supposed to attack with impunity, but the Browning 50 had an effective range of 700 yards. That extra 200 yards, roughly 6 football fields, turned safety into suicide. German pilots, who believed they were invisible, found themselves flying straight into invisible walls of lead. Their attacks were breaking apart, not because of superior aim, but because of sheer physics and American industry's ability to mass-produce that physics by the billions. By early 1943, the B-17 wasn't just a bomber, it was a philosophy made of metal, a fortress with 13 guns, every position overlapping, every gunner covering his brothers. To the men who flew it, those guns were lifelines. To the Germans who faced it, they were proof that the enemy had built a flying machine no amount of courage could easily destroy. When courage met mathematics, tactics had to change. By late 1942, German fighter pilots had already learned one bitter lesson: attacking a fortress from behind was suicide. The gunfire was too dense, too precise, too long-ranged. So the Luftwaffe began to experiment. Major Egon Mayer, a decorated ace of Jagdgeschwader II, studied captured film footage and gun camera reels frame by frame. He noticed something others had missed. The nose of the early B-17 was its soft underbelly, just a single .30 caliber gun up front. One man behind a pane of plexiglass, trying to stop a head-on attack that could arrive faster than a heartbeat. Mayer designed a new tactic, a frontal assault at closing speeds exceeding 600 miles per hour. The math was terrifying. A Messerschmitt 109 diving at full throttle, a B-17 coming the other way at 200 miles an hour, both closing so fast that a pilot had less than 3 seconds to aim, fire, and pull away. No corrections, no second chances. Fire too early and you missed. Fire too late and you collided. Veterans described it as staring down a train coming straight at you. They held their fire until they could count the window panels on the bomber's nose, until they could see the bombardier's face. Then they pressed the trigger, unleashed their cannons, and yanked back on the stick, missing by 50 feet, sometimes less. It worked, but only barely. A single 20mm shell detonating in the cockpit could kill the pilot, destroy instruments, and send a fortress tumbling out of formation. But each successful attack cost the Luftwaffe dearly. For every bomber destroyed, one or more fighters were lost. Then, the Americans adapted. Field modifications began appearing across England. Extra. 50 calories. Guns crammed into the nose compartments, jury-rigged mounts held together by scrap metal, and hope. Bombardiers doubled as gunners, bracing themselves against the aircraft's frame, fighting the slipstream to fire back. By May 1943, the factory-built B-17F arrived with proper mounts. Soon after came the B-17G, sporting the Bendix chin turret, 2 power-driven, 5.0 caliber guns under the nose, operated by the bombardier through an electronic sight. It was a technological leap, a mechanical guardian angel. The turret could track targets across 160 degrees horizontally and 80 vertically, spraying converging fire ahead of the aircraft with computer-assisted precision. Suddenly, the head-on attack, once the Luftwaffe's great equalizer, became a death sentence. German pilots who once dove into frontal passes now faced 6 to 8 50 calories guns firing directly into their path. There was no time to roll, no room to hide, no angle left unguarded. The chessboard had shifted again. For every move Germany made in the sky, America countered not with genius alone, but with machinery, metal, and an assembly line that never slept. And both sides knew the next battles would decide whether the fortress truly could survive the Reich's full fury. By the summer of 1943, the sky over Europe had become a crucible. Every mission was a wager men and metal against mathematics. The 8th Air Force believed its flying fortresses could cripple Germany's war machine through daylight precision. Berlin called it madness, but the Americans called it strategy. On August 17th, the gamble reached its peak. 2 great raids launched at dawn, one toward Regensburg, one toward Schweinfurt, the twin hearts of German aircraft and ball-bearing production. The plan was elegant. Regensburg's bombers would strike first, then continue south to North Africa. Schweinfurt's would hit hours later and return to England. 2 blows. One day, leaving the Luftwaffe split in confusion, but war rarely honors blueprints. Over. Eastern England, the weather collapsed, thick cloud choking the airfields. Regensburg's group managed to form up and depart on time. Schweinfurt's was delayed, first 30 minutes, then an hour, then 2. By the time they lifted off, the German defenders had already rearmed. What should have been 2 simultaneous punches became a 1-2 blow, with hours in between. At 9 a.m., the first formations crossed the Rhine. The Thunderbolt escorts turned back, fuel exhausted. The bombers pressed on alone, 1,800 men flying into the jaws of the Reich. They met Jagdgeschwader 26 head-on. Waves of Focke-Wulf 190 seconds slashed through the sky, firing rockets and 20mm cannon shells. Fortresses flamed and broke apart, one over the Ruhr, another over Nuremberg. Crewmen bailed out, white parachutes against black smoke. Yet the formations held. They closed ranks, the gaps filled by battered aircraft still clinging to the group. Gunners fired until their barrels glowed dull red, tracer streams crossing like latticework in the thin air. An hour later, the Regensburg bombers dropped their payloads and turned south over the Alps. 24 never made it. 3 more crash-landed in North Africa. Then came the Schweinfurt force, 6 hours behind schedule. Every fighter that had fought over Regensburg was waiting for them. 230 B-17s against the full weight of the Western Luftwaffe. The attacks were relentless. Messerschmitt, 109 seconds dove head-on to shatter the formation. Heavy Focke-Wulfs with 30mm cannons swept in from the sides. Every minute felt like a lifetime. 36 fortresses went down. Dozens limped home with engines dead and control cables severed. The losses stunned even hardened veterans. 60 bombers destroyed, 12 written off on landing. Hundreds of airmen killed, wounded, or captured. The Luftwaffe lost 38 fighters, a tactical success, but at a terrible strategic cost. Both sides claimed victory, but neither truly won. The Americans had struck deep and survived. The Germans had drawn blood, but failed to stop the offensive. Through September and October, the raids continued. Stuttgart, Bremen, Münster. Each name became a wound. Loss rates climbed above 10%, a statistic that meant 1 in 10 crews never returned. In some groups, it was 1 in 5. The men began to call it the bloody fall. They knew the odds. At mission briefings, when the curtain lifted to reveal the target map, nervous laughter rippled through the room. "Goodbye, boys," someone would mutter, dark humor masking quiet dread. On October 14th, 1943, the curtain rose on a single word, Schweinfurt, and every man in the room understood. They were flying into history. After the fires of Schweinfurt died down, the true war began, the one fought not in the skies, but in the factories. In February 1943, when German engineers first dissected a captured B-17, they expected crude mass production. What they found left them silent. Every part fit perfectly, every gun, every belt, every hydraulic line machined with a precision Germany once believed only it possessed. The logs inside the wreckage told a story of industrial obsession. Maintenance schedules, serial numbers, ammunition, lot codes, every mission tracked, every component replaced on time. To the Germans, that discipline looked almost mechanical, a supply system that never slept. And then came the numbers. 1 American ammunition plant in Street. Louis produced 6.7 billion rounds during the war, more than the entire Luftwaffe consumed in all calibers. By April 1945, U.S. Air Forces fired 25 million rounds in a single month, almost all of it 5.0 caliber. Meanwhile, German factories rationed every bullet. Pilots were ordered to fire only when hits were certain. Fuel shortages meant practice flights were cut. New recruits went into combat with 50 hours of flight time against Americans trained for 300. The war had become arithmetic. Every exchange, 1 B-17 lost for 1 fighter down favored the side that could replace its losses. And only one side could. Captured reports from German intelligence officers read like confessions. They described an enemy whose strength was not genius, but abundance. Factories in Detroit, Seattle, and Buffalo ran around the clock, immune to bombing, fueled by oil, steel, and manpower that never stopped flowing. Each 50 calories cartridge represented not just a weapon, but a philosophy. Brass drawn from American mines, powder from Ohio mills, copper from Montana, all transformed into bullets that crossed an ocean, fed into machine guns, and met German fighters over Europe. For every belt of ammunition the Luftwaffe loaded, the Americans loaded 10. For every fighter Germany produced, America built 2 bombers and still had fighters left to escort them. By late 1943, the Luftwaffe could feel the imbalance tightening like a noose. Their pilots were still brave, still skilled, but their weapons were rusting, their engines starving, and their replacements half-trained boys sent to fight veterans with unlimited ammunition. It wasn't just a war of machines anymore. It was a war of manufacturing metabolism, who could eat faster, burn longer, rebuild quicker. And the United States had become a factory that could not be bombed. When German analysts looked at those gleaming brass, 50 calories casings, they weren't seeing bullets. They were seeing the end of a nation's endurance. By early 1944, the air war had reached a breaking point. The 8th Air Force had learned its lesson in blood. Black Thursday had shown that even 50 calories guns could not defend against every angle, every attack. Without fighter cover, no formation, no matter how brave, could survive deep into Germany. But then came the aircraft that changed everything. Sleek, fast, and with drop tanks hanging beneath its wings, the P-51 Mustang arrived over Europe like an answer to a prayer. It didn't just escort the bombers, it hunted for them. Equipped with the same 50 caliber guns as the B-17s it guarded, the Mustang could fly to Berlin, fight, and still come home. The old pattern broke overnight. Now, it was the German fighters who were being ambushed, often before they even reached the bomber streams. The hunter had become the hunted. Mustang pilots flew with ruthless efficiency. Their orders were simple: clear the skies. They dove ahead of the bomber formations, sweeping the air clean of interceptors, then circled back to escort their formations home. If a German fighter survived an attack on the bombers, the Mustangs followed it all the way down, even strafing airfields to destroy planes on the ground. The results were devastating. Luftwaffe losses spiked by the hundreds every month. Veteran aces, the men who had survived Spain, the Channel, and Stalingrad, were now being cut down faster than replacements could take their place. Those replacements were boys with 50 hours in the air, flying engines that coughed on synthetic fuel, and firing guns loaded with shells made from recycled brass. Against them came swarms of Mustangs, P-47 Thunderbolts, and still, the endless waves of flying fortresses, each carrying 13 guns and 7,500 rounds of American confidence. German pilots spoke of it as drowning in the sky. They would fight their way through the escorts, break into a formation, and see the tracers waiting, hundreds of glowing red lines converging from every direction. Even if they survived their pass, they had to turn and climb again, only to find Mustangs already there, waiting. By the spring of 1944, the numbers told the truth that no propaganda could hide. In the air over Germany, the Luftwaffe was dying not in defeat, but in exhaustion. Every downed German plane meant a pilot lost forever. Every lost pilot meant a hole that could never be filled. The Americans, by contrast, replaced losses weekly. Factories ran without pause. Supply ships crossed the Atlantic unchallenged. On paper, the Luftwaffe still existed. In reality, it was bleeding out in the cold European sky, one dogfight at a time. The 50 calories, guns on the B-17s still roared, but now they were no longer alone. Above them, gleaming in sunlight, Mustangs flew cover-patient, lethal, and tireless. From that moment, the air belonged to the Allies. The rest was arithmetic.